I didn't initially didn't go thinking I'd be a corporate attorney, but that's just kind of how I kept continuing down and kind of kept falling into place with the corporate work and now I continue doing that and I love it. And every day I feel like I help people do what they do best, which is whatever their business is or whatever I can do to help them. And I continue being that trusted advisor. And I think to be able to come from where I was behind the chair and listening to people, whatever they're dealing with that day, and just being able to help either transform them from, kind of the outside in, and when they leave, just feeling better about whatever problem they had walking into my chair. And then now, hopefully making people feel better with whatever problem they have when they come to my desk. That's kind of hopefully I make them feel better.
Welcome to Small Acts of Rebellion, a podcast where the unspoken narratives at the intersection of our personal and professional lives come to light. I'm your host, Heather Pridemore, your guide on this journey of discovery and defiance. Join me as we uncover the rebellious spirit that shapes our careers and lives. It's time to own your story. Are you ready?
Today's guest is Lauren Cammarata Snow, a business, trademark, and regulatory attorney who passionately serves individuals and businesses through a wide range of services, including general business matters, contract drafting and negotiation, regulatory compliance, and intellectual property prosecution, licensing, and enforcement. Ms. Snow works with Goodspeed Merrill, a full-service business lifecycle firm, representing many of her clients from formation or purchase to exit or sale and everything in between. Her extensive experience with regard to intellectual property rights has garnered her a reputation as a reliable resource for trademark and trade secret work, as well as licensing creation and enforcement. Being a licensed cosmetologist, she also has an extensive expertise working with highly regulated industries, giving her invaluable insight in working with obtaining licenses and maintaining compliance with any applicable regulations. Born and raised in the state of Colorado, Lauren graduated summa cum laude at the Metropolitan State University, from where she holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Human Services Mental Health Counseling with a minor in Spanish. She obtained her Juris Doctorate from the University of Denver, Stern College of Law. When she is not working, she enjoys exploring the world with her husband and her daughter. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thanks, Heather. I'm excited to be here.
So for those who are listening, Lauren is actually my counsel. I have gone through some recent businessy items, including an acquisition. And so that is how I've gotten to know Lauren. And I thought it was so interesting that Lauren started her career in cosmetology and then switched to being a lawyer. And so that was one reason why I was like, I have to have Lauren on the podcast. So I'm really excited that you're here, Lauren. I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation about career trajectories and how we sort of make those decisions as we go through our career journeys.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that. I think interesting is maybe the best word to use. And I think when I've heard you talk about your podcast and listening to some of the past episodes, I think there's been a lot of overlap in some of the things that you've talked about in the past and some things that I've experienced that hopefully we can weave into the conversation today.
Well, yeah, let's do it. So, I mean, from working in like beauty to now working in law, that's a pretty dynamic career journey. And so I'm really interested in just talking about like what influenced your decision to move from cosmetology into a legal career.
It's so funny. I always joke that it was actually a really natural progression for me. I think it's funny, you don't think about it, but with cosmetology, it is a profession where I really did get to know people and I really did help people. And I think that was really what sparked me getting into law as well. And I think with cosmetology, I really just kind of fell into it. When I graduated high school, I was a terrible student. I hated school, and the last thing that I could ever possibly think about doing was getting into more school. But my mom was a first generation college student, and she was really wanted me to get a further education, and she pushed that a lot for me and my brother. And academically, I always did really well. I was always pretty gifted academically, but I had really bad social anxiety, and because of that, I was at the risk of failing almost every one of my classes starting in kindergarten. I was put into special education in kindergarten all the way through elementary school, middle school, and high school, I just struggled a lot. I had really bad interaction anxiety, and things were really difficult for me. And at the end of my high school career, I really didn't think I would even go to college at all. And cosmetology just kind of seemed like something I could do. And it was a trade, and it was a good career. It was something that I could use and something that I could continue doing and make a good life out of. And I think in cosmetology school, I really found myself. I really did kind of come out of my shell, and I liked school. It was kind of the first time that I really did like it. I loved learning the history of it. With cosmetology, I loved learning about the history of cosmetology. I think I had a lot of fun with, and I loved color, and I loved learning mixing color, and I loved learning all the different kind of the chemistry of it and the biology of it. I loved learning about skin. I really got into skincare was kind of one of the my favorite parts of cosmetology school. And I first worked in salons and spas doing esthetician work, and that was really I really loved doing that, but that's really kind of where I dove in academically, and I really was kind of like a star student for the first time in cosmetology, and I thought like, "Okay, maybe I can kind of do like the school thing." So while I was working in salons and spas, I actually went back to college and I started taking business classes because I thought, "Well, maybe I can do a little bit of these business classes and maybe I could eventually open my own salon." And I was really liking the cosmetology work at the time because when you are working in a salon, especially when I was doing hair, you become a real trusted person when I was standing behind a chair. I was learning about, people's divorces before they were happening, and people were entrusting me with some of their deepest, darkest secrets. You really do tell your hairstylist more than you tell your best friend sometimes because you just kind of you're with them. Sometimes people divulge their deepest, darkest secrets, to their hairstylist more than anyone else. And I liked that. I liked the feeling of helping people and really being that trusted person. And I think that was the first time I really felt like I was kind of coming into my own person through that. I started going to Red Rocks Community College at that time, and I started doing really well in college. I was getting A's for the first time and actually going to class and making friends. And after I got a an associate's degree at Red Rocks, I thought, okay, maybe I can continue on. I'm starting to do pretty well at this college thing, but I wasn't really feeling very passionate about the calculus and the accounting classes that I was taking. And I had a roommate at the time who was getting a degree in human services. And she was taking classes like interpersonal communication and these classes like human services that felt a lot more closely aligned with the things that I was feeling really passionate about. And that's the degree that I got was human services. And that felt like a really natural progression to me and really aligned with what I was doing with hairstyling, which was really helping people. And that's the degree human services is the degree of helping. And then I went to Metropolitan State University, and got my degree in human services. And like I said, it was a really natural progression into mental health counseling from hairstyling. And in that, while I was getting my bachelor's degree, that was really the first time I was getting involved in student groups. I was getting straight A's in all of my classes. I was this stellar student, graduated summa cum laude. I got a 4.0 when I graduated college. That was the first time that it ever happened in my life. So that was, again, just really felt like a really natural place for me to be, but a world away from where I had started from. But again, kind of totally fell into it, not at all meaning to. But again, kind of started from that really wanting to help people, not really knowing that that's what I was getting into, and ended up in that mental health kind of, I think, was driving a lot of all of that, helping and wanting to be there for people. At the end of that 4-year degree, though, I think that's where I kind of made the decision of now I'm on this really good path. I'm really able to help people. I'm really in this position where I can do this good in the world. And I really wanted to do something beyond myself and beyond of this community that I was kind of a part of. And at the time, I had met my husband at Metro, and he was going on to get his master's degree in social work, and all of our friends were going on to get their master's degree in social work, and I thought, "Well, if they're doing it, I can probably get a master's degree in social work too." But my brother, who had always been a star student, and he was always kind of, on the straight and narrow. He was going to law school at the time. He was graduating law school when I was graduating with my 4-year degree. And I thought, well, if he could go to law school, if he can graduate law school, I can probably graduate law school. And so I applied to law school kind of with the same thought process of, I just want to help people. And if I can apply to law school, if I can get in, I probably won't be able to get in. If I don't get in, I'll go get my master's in social work and I'll go that route. But if I'll get in, then that'll be a sign that I can go on and go to law school and help people around me. And I got into the University of Denver, which is my choice school, and that was really my arrow was to help people, and that's what I continued on doing, and went to University of Denver, and I loved it, and I just kind of continued down that path. And I didn't initially didn't go thinking I'd be a corporate attorney, but that's just kind of how I kept continuing down and kind of kept falling into place with the corporate work. And now I continue doing that, and I love it, and every day I feel like I help people do what they do best, which is whatever their business is or whatever I can do to help them, and I continue being that trusted advisor. And I think to be able to come from where I was behind the chair and listening to people, whatever they're dealing with that day, and just being able to help either transform them from, kind of the outside in, and when they leave, just feeling better about whatever problem they had walking into my chair. And then now, hopefully making people feel better with whatever problem they have when they come to my desk. That's kind of hopefully I make them feel better. Not always the case, but that is my goal every day. But just that, so remain that trusted advisor to somebody and make that big impact in the life that hopefully in the lives that I do, that's not lost on me. And I feel very humbled to be able to do what I do every day.
There's so many things I want to unpack there, Lauren, but I had made a note to myself because your journey from cosmetology to law reminds me a lot of the movie Legally Blonde, especially the first one because there's like the cosmetology like tie-in, the hair and stuff is part of the storyline. But when you were talking about you were like, "Oh, well, these people are going to school and like if they can do it, I can probably do it." There's that one line they've made 100 memes of it, but it's Reese Witherspoon's character is just like it's hard, because when he's like,
Yeah.
you got into Harvard, and she's like, what? Like it's hard.
Yeah.
And so I feel like,
Yeah.
while it was a little bit of a silly tie-in, it's funny because it kind of in a way aligns a little bit with your
Yeah.
story. But there are some things I want to kind of pull at. And so one of the things that I kind of tuned in on is when you were talking about some of that earlier social anxiety, but then everything you've wanted to do has really been driven towards helping people. And so I just didn't know if there was any more story there, Lauren, like any personal experience or, something in your value system that was like really driving you to sort of overcome some of that social anxiety because what you really wanted to do was help people.
Yeah, I think it's such a great question, and I as a child, I had a lot of trauma, and I was born with cleft palate, very severe cleft palate, and I had a series of surgeries starting as an infant. And I think I had a lot of feeling like I'm so weird and I'm so much different, and feeling like, a lot of like I'm not good enough. Yeah, I do hope that my story can reach someone who maybe has a similar experience of my law career didn't start until I was in my last year of college, which I'm a non-traditional student. And I was in my late 20s when I was in college, and decided to go to law school. So I wasn't an 18-year-old student deciding to go to law school, and I was not an A student, and I was not I wasn't a person who was on that trajectory at all. I wasn't like a cookie cutter. I'm not certainly not a cookie cutter type person.
I was just going to add, I think that the cookie cutter is a fallacy. Like, I think we all think there's a cookie cutter, but the more you talk to people and the more stories you hear, you just realize that the cookie cutter doesn't actually exist. Like, that's a myth.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that it's been so beneficial for me to have had that whole life beforehand. And I think for a lot of lawyers, I think for a lot of attorneys and a lot of in any profession to have had that life before, that you can lend that to the people around you, to have the stories and the experiences to share, of saying like, I can relate to you because I've been there, or I have a similar experience, and I can offer this experience to you because I've, you know, I've been there, or I've been through a similar experience where, you know, I'm 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 able to relate to you in a different way. But no, I think a lot of that has been a lot of my life has just kind of been the jumping in with 2 feet of like, well, yeah, like, I guess I'll try it, you know? I guess I'll take a chance on it. I did have a professor at Metro who I remember talking to her in her office, and when I was making the decision of going to go to get my master's in social work or go to law school, and I remember talking to her, and I was kind of like, "Well, I'm not really like a law school type person," you know, and she was like, "Well, just take the test," and I did take the test, and I remember thinking like, "Okay, well, if I bomb it, like, I'm coming back here and we're gonna figure something else out," like, you know, and I fully intended on being back in her office the next week because I was, you know, I'm not like a law person, you know? That's kind of what I was thinking, but I was like, "Okay, well, I'll try it, you know, might as well. What else are we doing this weekend?" So, I think that was a lot of my experience. It was just like, "All right, we'll try it."
When I was listening to your story, Lauren, it sounded like even though you didn't really consider yourself like a great student, it also sounded to me like education was like really important to you. And I sort of picked up on a little bit of like worth or like validation, in your conversation about education. And so I was just wondering where that came from or like how does that play into your story?
I think that's a good point. I think that comes from my mother. I think education is so important to her. Something that she's instilled in me and my brother is that it's something that can never be taken away from you. And I think it was something that was never given to her. She was raised by both of her parents never appreciated the value of an education. And I remember stories from her mother that were when she was talking about wanting to go to college, and her mother would say things like, "Why do you want to go to college? Why don't you just marry a banker?" Like that would be the solution to all of her problems. And my mom was raised in the 70s and, you know, the 60s and 70s when it wasn't it was expected that a woman would be at home and would be raising children and not go out and get jobs. And I think that's fine for a lot of women. And I think a lot of women want to have that type of lifestyle. And I think we're very lucky to live in a time when women have a choice to stay at home or to get an education and work. It's been very important to me to have an education. I think that's been, to me, it's been a way for me to get myself into a lifestyle that I like living and a lifestyle that I wasn't probably wouldn't have been able to be a part of if I didn't have the education that I did. And I was 100% on, you know, student loans. I did have help from my parents, but if I didn't take out student loans, I wouldn't have had the education that I did. And so I'm super grateful for that. But I think that if I didn't have the education that I had to me, it's access. It was access to the lifestyle that I had and have now, and that's kind of what the importance is to me, I think. I think it gets me the access to the things that I wanna have and the things that I wanna show my daughter for her future. So I think that's all part of it. I think those are all kind of parts of it.
I mean, I recognize a lot of that in my own story, Lauren, and you and I have probably talked about this, but you know, for me, education for my background was a ticket out, right? I grew up very blue collar. My mom did not finish high school. And so they always put an emphasis on education because they didn't want me and my sister to have the same kind of lifestyle that they had. And so, there was this push towards education without any real understanding of like strategy or, how to navigate academia for maximum impact or any of those things, right? It was just like you have to go to college. Like this is just this important thing you have to do. And so I recognized some of that and for my own story as well, I think there's a lot of that worth and like validation in education. The first time I went to graduate school, I finished with a 4.0. The second time I went to graduate school was for my MBA and I was working full time as an executive. And honestly, there were some projects that I was like, I'll take a B. It's okay. Like I I only have so much bandwidth and so I'll take a B. But I will also say that when I graduated, a lot of people were posting that they had been accepted into like these like special, kind of like the cum laude thing, some kind of honor. And I, of course, didn't get that because I had sort of compromised for these Bs and instead of sort of shooting for that like straight A situation. And so it hit my ego a little bit. You know, it's hard because like you make the choice in the moment and then the moment passes and then you see all the people celebrating and you're like, well, I could have done that, but I didn't. And now, you know, now there's like a feeling of a pang of regret. But my second master's degree was for the purpose of a ticket in. So while education was first a ticket out, the MBA was what at the time what I saw as my ticket into the C-suite. And so, you know, there's this weird dynamic that education plays in myself because I'm a first generation. It sounds like your mom was first generation. So you're coming at it from a different perspective because you're second generation. So I don't know if any of that kind of ties back to some of the thoughts you were having, but I was feeling like I was connecting with a lot of what you were saying because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think so. On the other side too, my dad is it's a very different dynamic on my dad's side. My dad is an artist and he has his degree is also he has a Bachelor of Fine Art and he used his art degree for a long time. He was an artist and then ended up working for the state for many years and didn't do art for a long time. And now he's retired and he's back to doing art. But I don't think that he, saw educate. Well, I mean, I think he saw education maybe the same of like get a college degree, but I don't think he really was like supportive in the same way of like I don't think he could have like I don't think he never really asked if I had an assignment or anything. He showed up at my graduation, I guess.
What's interesting to me about that new fact of information that your dad was an artist is, you know, here you are in this really analytical type career, right? Like legal I mean, there's art to it, but it's kind of an analytical career. But then you specialize in an area of law like trademark and IP, which ties very much to the creative side of like business. And so I think that's just an interesting connection point there as you tell me your story, Lauren. But I also think it's a good segue because I wanted to talk a little bit about your specialty of trademark and IP law and because those are so specific to branding, I'm really wondering how your expertise in this area has influenced your approach to building and maintaining your own brand, your own personal and professional brand.
Yeah. It is interesting that you asked that. So I think I'm still really figuring that out. I think I I love brands and I love branding. I get so excited about it. And I think having like especially the background with my dad, like I love I feel like I have that appreciation maybe a little bit more because he the way that he talks about art, it's something I don't get. I mean, like, he will talk about, like, the depths of a painting and the layers and things, and it's just something I appreciate, certainly, but I just don't get, and it's just a certain expertise that I don't necessarily have that he does, but I certainly appreciate it, but I do get so excited about it, and when people tell me about their brands and the colors that they choose and why they why the bottom of the K goes up like this and why it twists that way and why they choose things and to help them protect it and to help them, like monetize on certain things. I get so excited about it. Building my own has been a little more challenging, I think, just because it's harder to find your own kind of thing. But I think to be able to help people on their own thing, I think that's something that to me has been really special. And I think to be that that trusted advisor for somebody, again, it goes back to kind of my own roots of wanting to help people and to build in the creativity piece of it. I think that's where I found my specialties kind of intersect because it adds in my creativity piece of things, but then it also adds in that piece of me that really I'm driven by being able to help people and be that person that people can really rely on and really trust and that they can really that can really help them. But as far as my own professional brand, I don't know that I really figured that out yet. I think I'm still working on building my own professional identity.
So, Lauren, I'm curious with sort of some uncertainty around your own brand, but such a passion for protecting other people's brands. Are there not some aspects of your, skill set or your values that you could sort of turn inward and like use as like a mirror to like help you navigate your own professional and personal brand?
Yeah, I think there are. I think the one of the challenges with law, just in general, is that I think you're so busy. I think that, like, something that I think people maybe don't realize is there's the hours that you work, you have a certain number of expectations in terms of the actual hours that you work. There's administrative hours of entering time and answering emails and reviewing your work and reviewing bills and mentoring younger associates and things like that. And you don't really actually have time to work on yourself and your business. That's still an expectation of you. And that's still something that you have to do, much like every other entrepreneur. It's like you're expected to produce the work that you're doing, but you still have all these other expectations to run your business. So I think it's just the actual time to sit down and do it. So I think that's the part of it that I'm in that's the era that I'm in right now. It's just kind of still building that and seeing that all kind of come together, which it is coming together. It's been a very exciting time for me right now, which I'll take the opportunity to announce if I can right now. But we're going through a very exciting time at the firm right now of introducing some new services, some new trademark services at the firm. And we're introducing a new department, an property department, which we have not had before in the history of Goodspeed Merrill. So that's something that I'm championing right now, which in the 11 years of the firm, we haven't had intellectual property. So that's something that I'm doing alone, which has been quite a task of setting up the services and setting up the pricing and setting up the roles and responsibilities of the admin staff and the associates and myself within the firm. So that's something that's all in the works currently, but on top of all the other work that I'm doing within the firm, it's just been a little slow. But it's been really fun, and it's been something that's been really cool to be creating within the firm. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things that's been in the works.
That sounds really exciting. I mean, I know I mentioned earlier that you and I had done some businessy stuff. And one of the things that we had actually worked on was the trademark for this podcast. So Lauren was actually one of the first people who knew I was going to do a podcast. So this would have been like last year. And we had a lot of interesting conversations about trademark and intellectual property when it came to the podcast. So I'm really excited for you, Lauren. And so that sounds like some really awesome news. And I look forward to hearing more about that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, let's take a little bit more of a pivot here. As a lawyer, you're going to be pretty much risk adverse, right? Like that's the whole point of being a lawyer is you're there to sort of navigate risk and advise, counsel, as they say. And so I want to know, how does that kind of align with your core values? And do you have any examples of how that approach affects your lifestyle or your personal decisions? Like, are you as risk adverse in life as you are in career?
It's such a great question, and I think it's funny. I get asked a lot from my clients about what would I do in any given situation, and it's not a question I can answer because I'm not in that position. And I am entrepreneurial just by spirit. And when I was a hairdresser, I had my own business. I had, I rented a chair. I was an independent contractor. And I know what it's like to be a business owner, more or less. I know what it's like to have to budget. I know what it's like to have to market. I know what it's like to have to bootstrap. And I've had to make decisions. And so whenever I have a client ask me a question, I will tell them, I'll give you all of the information that you need. I'll say, these are the risks. This is the law. If there are consequences involved with following the law or not following the law, this is what you need to know. But I can't make that decision for you. And as a person, given really the situation, I might be generally I tend to be very risk averse. I'm just not a very risky person. Sometimes, I mean, there might be some situations, and depending on if there's alcohol involved or not. Just kidding, but but I tend to be risk averse, but that's why I'm not, probably why I'm not a millionaire yet. But I tell my clients, that's why I'm this on this side of the desk. I can't make that decision for you. And usually if I say something like I can't spend your money, That usually helps answer the question, but I really can't answer the question. And so usually what I tell my clients is this is all of the information, and you really have to make that decision. And it really is, usually what it comes down to is it's a business decision. This is the legal risk and this is the decision that you have to make. And there are times where I have had clients where I've given all of the information and I've said whatever decision you want to make, we'll make that decision, and I will fight to the death for whatever outcome you want to have happen, and that's the most that I can do. And we've been in positions where I've 100% thought that we would not have a positive outcome. And there have been times where I've been wrong and there have been times where I've been right. So it's not always a great position to be in, but I'm very grateful every day to be able to be the person, to be in the position that I am for my clients. And I'm very grateful to be an advocate, to have the job that I do. I feel very lucky to be able to do that. I don't think that there's a better job really. I get to really fight for things that I think are right. That's not always the case. There are some times where I do have some clients who I don't always agree with what they ask me to do, but if it really is something that really does not align with my values, or if I really do think is morally wrong, then that is something that I have an ethical obligation to remove myself from. And that is another thing that I'm grateful for. We do have ethical guidelines and obligations that I can rely on. But for the most part, I do get to fight the good fight every day, and I'm really grateful for that. So it's tough, but again, it's tough because I think the problem is that I want to be that person that people rely on, and I have to say, "I'm sorry, you have to make that decision." And you just have to have people that understand that, and I think that you have to be able to work with people who understand that they have to, at the end of the day, make that decision for themselves.
Lauren, how are you making those decisions for yourself, though? Because I mean, from what I hear you saying, at least my interpretation of what you said is that you're very comfortable because law provides all of these data points and frameworks and sort of like tools, right? And it's all sort of like you're navigating like a set of systems. But when you're having to make decisions for yourself, I guess I'm just curious, like, are you taking any unconventional approaches? Are you making any unexpected choices? Or does the fact that your work, which you seem to really enjoy, which is very risk adverse and very like systematized, does that mirror your personal life, or do you feel like your personal life exists very differently than your legal life?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I look at everything, like, from my daughter's perspective. Now that I've ever since I was a small child, I've always wanted to be a mom. That was my number 1 in life. I've always wanted to be a mom. And now that I am a mom, I wake up every day. I have a sticky note next to my computer that says, "How will this help you be a good mom?" So I know if I'm about to blow up on somebody or if I get upset about something, I look at that and I think, like, "Is this gonna help me be a good mom today?" And that's the number one thing I look at, and that's my moral compass. And I just think about, like, if my daughter looks at me, and if my daughter were to see me, or if my daughter were to know that that was the reaction that I had to something, is that what I would want my daughter to see? So that's kind of what I use as my moral compass, more or less. I want her to be proud of every decision that I make. And that's kind of what I more or less use as, like, if I'm making a decision, or if I take a stand on something, I want her to look back on it and say, "That's I'm proud that that's my mom."
That really does help answer the question because I think, while it doesn't necessarily speak to maybe risk aversion or systemization, I think it's an interesting concept. And I'm not going to ask you this, Lauren, because I think it takes us into the weeds. But I would be curious, maybe sometime over coffee, that we could talk about, are there any situations where the question of like, does this make me a good mom, would go against any of the sort of, things that relate back to like law. And so that could be a really interesting conversation over
Yeah.
coffee sometime.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Well, Lauren, we are coming near the end of the show. And one of the things that I love to ask guests at the end of each episode is if someone said this was entirely too long, I did not listen. What is one thing you'd want them to take away from this conversation?
I think the number one thing that I would hope someone could take away from our conversation today is that anybody can start at any time, wherever they are, and make the life that they want and achieve the dreams that they want to have and make the life that they want to have.
I couldn't agree more. Like we said, the cookie cutter is a fallacy. And so I think that is a great place to end the show. Lauren, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me, Heather.
If you enjoyed this episode and are seeking to redefine success on your own terms, subscribe to Small Acts of Rebellion and join a community that celebrates authenticity and personal growth.